A pleasant day, everyone. My name is Andrew Navarra.
I am John Adrian Navarra.
And I am Nicole Nugtalan.
And we will discuss the approaches and methods of comparative education.
A requirement in EDUC 218, Comparative Education.
Let's go.
There are a number of methodological approaches used by scholars in their approach to the study of comparative education. It is important to note that methodology in comparative education, as in other educational disciplines, is determined by the purpose of the study. Like other social sciences, comparative education has been studied at different times of its development, with different methodological approaches. A close look at the various developmental phases reveal that each phase has produced a different type of work that mainly depend on the dominant views and motives for comparative education study. Starting with the simple narratives of education abroad during the phase of travelers' tales, the methodological approaches of comparative education have progressively evolved into the current application of the sophisticated and complex methods of social sciences, which in most cases are empirically based. With a large clientele arising from its multidisciplinary nature, comparative education scholars have not been able to agree on a single, universally accepted method of study. This view has resulted in a multiplicity of debates and opinions of what method is best suitable for use. The approaches and methods of comparative education are descriptive method, historical method, psychological method, social method, quantitative and statistical method, and scientific method. Descriptive method. This method was used in the 19th century because the main purpose then, in comparative education, was to incorporate the good points of another country. This approach, therefore, called for a detailed description of educational affairs of another country. An educational comparativist can make a description of his own educational system, as well as practices. The researcher has to start by reading extensively. He can also personally visit the country whose educational system is studying. So many comparative educationists presented detailed descriptive accounts of educational systems of the countries they visited. Among them were Marc-Antoine Julien de Paris, Victor Cousin, Horace Mann, Henry Bernard and Matthew Arnold. Historical method. In the historical method, we study the modern educational problems. This method reveals the basis on which the modern educational system is based. Needless to say that this knowledge may help us in eliminating undesirable elements in the system, and further strengthening the desirable ones. It will be wrong to think that we employ the historical method only to know the past, in order that we may understand the present better. In fact, our purpose is also to improve the future by hinting at those factors which may be more useful. In the historical method, we try to understand all those geographical, social, racial, political, religious and linguistic factors which influence the educational system of a country. Nicholas Hans, Schneider and Kandel have emphasized this method. But one of the greatest limitations of historical method is that the data on which we base our study may not be reliable, because in the collection of the same, decay is not observed. Psychological method. Psychological method is devoted to the development and dissemination of methods for collecting, analyzing, understanding, and interpreting psychological data. Emphasis of individual strengths and personal motivation to promote learning use techniques that focus on the well-being of individual students. Teachers use methods for each student to develop the plans and motivation to reach their goals. It is important to know that a psychological approach is not a complete explanation of a specific topic, so a particular approach is not the correct answer to a topic, it is simply applicable. For example, in our country, in most of the schools, teachers do not know the basis method of teaching to approach the student psychology, as compared to Western countries, say America, where if they want to teach the students how to add 2 plus 2 equals 4, they will do some activities like, they will give them to add 4 oranges, but here they just ask student to learn 2 plus 2 equals 4, by beating them or putting extra pressure, which affects their mind. Social approach. In the sociological method, the educational problems are studied in a social context. This is done with the belief that the educational system of a country is conditioned by its social, cultural, economic, political and religious situations. Hence, the educational problems of a country have their origin in some social problems, and they do not exist by themselves, as there is a close relationship between education and society. The sociological methods of the study of comparative education does not emphasize only the past causative factors, but also those social and cultural aspects which may be responsible for the problem. In every society, there is social stratification. This means that naturally, people in any society do not belong to only one group or class. Examples are race, economy, level of education, one's profession or the profession of one's parents, the location of one's residence, one's family background, among others. Comparative sociology involves comparison of the social processes between nation-states or across different types of society. Examples: capitalist socialist aims of social education are creating global citizens, being aware of the world around them, respect and value diversity, take action for human rights, social justice and sustainability, and take responsibility for own action.
Quantitative and statistical approach. The study of comparative education, we analyze the similarities and factors inherent in the education systems of various countries. Hence, it is necessary to use the statistical method for finding out the progress or decline of education in a country. In this method, various types of educational data are collected about a country. For example, the data about the number of students at a certain stage of education, expenditure on them, the percentages of passes and failures at various stages of education, expenses on teachers' salaries, school buildings, and other items are collected, and the same are compared with the identical data of another country. The greatest difficulty of the statistical method is to procure reliable data. Generally, due care is not taken in the collection of data. Consequently, many of them are false. Another difficulty in this connection is that the various educational terms used in different countries do not connote the same sense. Therefore, their statistical analysis is falsified. Moreover, through the statistical method, we cannot understand the educational characteristics that are the result of social, cultural, economic, political, and religious situations of a country. Evidently, the use of the statistical method is very limited. Scientific approach. An approach in which the study of comparative education is carried out empirically by formulating hypotheses, defining the important concepts, setting out the variables as well as the conditions for establishing the validity of the hypotheses formulated. Since in any scientific research, data collection, its interpretation with the help of statistics of analysis are very important. This method was developed and population by Harold Noah and Mark Eckstein in 1960, when they wrote a book entitled Toward a Science of Comparative Education. In this approach, they recommended the following procedure: 1. Problem identification and review of literature. 2. Definitions of central concepts, terms, and indicators. 3. Selection/sampling of units of study or cases to be studied. 4. Data collection. 5. Data analysis and manipulation. 6. Interpretation of data finding and results. 7. Drawing of conclusions and recommendations.
Sana all ligtas.